Hello everybody and welcome to As Far As the Eye. This is a brand new strategy game releasing September 10th about a great migration. You play as a nomadic tribe that has to plan out their journey to get to the Eye, the only known location that can withstand the oncoming flood. Now this video is sponsored by Goblins Studio and Maple Whispering Limited, the publishers for As Far As the Eye. Please check the link in the description to find out more about the game and help support the channel in the process. So, in As Far As the Eye, your tribe consists of a small band of nomads called Pupils, unique characters with their own traits and specialties, and then a caravan, a big, hulking pack animal that carries your supplies. Now, before we get into some of the gameplay mechanics, I want to mention that despite what looks like a chilled out and pretty zen art style, this game is really punishing and has a really deep resource management and character management. It's all about long-term forward planning, both in how you plan out your individual turns and how you plan out your overall journey. So, let's get into it. When you start your campaign, you're given a map of branching pathways that allow you to plot your course. Each stop along the way is called a halt, and to get from one halt to another, you have to overcome some sort of obstacle by stockpiling certain resources. You might want to take the shortest route possible, but it may end up being the most demanding for resources. You might also want to go out of your way to get something that you don't already have, like going into a forest for wood, or stockpile food before going into a barren canyon. These are things that you're going to learn over time through experience, but ultimately it's entirely dependent on your situation at the time, and the map is procedurally generated, so each campaign will present different circumstances. So when you start off in a halt, your entire tribe are riding on the back of your caravan. Now you'll see on the bottom left how many turns there are before this area will be flooded, and based on where you've chosen to go next, you'll see what your objective is before you can leave the area. Now normally it's like gathering a bulk stockpile of resources and maybe also completing certain tasks. The caravan moves a bit slower than a regular pupil, but it also acts as your default storage point, so placing it near resources is quite important to make the loading process faster. Once the caravan has settled down, it can never move again until you're ready to leave the halt for good. So it's very important to scout around a little bit and then decide where to settle. With each move and each turn ended, the clock is always ticking against you though. So after you settle, your pupils disembark and are ready to get to work. Pupils have their own personality traits that can affect how they behave, such as consuming less food, moving faster, refusing to work certain jobs, and things like that. They can also be personalized by renaming them and changing their color to make them a bit more recognizable. Pupils ultimately are shapeshifters and become different creatures based on the job that they're doing. Now this is just visual distinction to let you know what their current roles are. So a pupil can be assigned a job, let's say one is assigned to chop wood and another is assigned to gather fruit. Once assigned to the job, they'll run back to the caravan and visually morph into a gatherer. It's almost like they're putting on a uniform. If they're not wearing the uniform, they can't work the job, so they'll run back to the caravan, change, and then go back out. Now of course, this takes time and it's longer the further away you are. Later on, they'll do this at different buildings instead of running all the way back to the caravan. So for example, a woodcutter would morph at the nearest sawmill building. Now as I said earlier, the game is all about forward planning and time management, and this delay between switching roles means you ultimately want to change roles as little as possible. But with 13 different disciplines and only a handful of pupils, they will inevitably need to change quite frequently. So back to our gatherers. The more they gather, both wood and fruit, the more they'll level up their gathering discipline. Once they reach level 3, they can then further specialize into either a fruit gatherer or a wood cutter. Pupils are pretty flexible though. They can still morph back into anything else if you want them to, and then morph right back. But as we said, you want to avoid this role swapping as much as possible. Also, when you get to these more specialized roles, they then have to work the resource building associated with it to level up further. So a sawmill for a woodcutter. So again, you're encouraged to try and keep them in the same place, not running around going back to the caravan all the time. So that's basically how jobs work. Once you tell a pupil to work a tile, they'll continue to do it until the resource is depleted or until you give them another order. Here's where the resource management comes in. There's 10 resources in the game. The first 4 are primarily used for building. You've got wood, stone, ore, and wool. You'll need these to construct mines, farms, bakeries, and pretty much anything that can be built. There's then 4 food resources: fruit, game, fish, and cereals. These are typically combined in either a cookhouse or a bakery in different amounts to create different amounts of food rations. Now, food rations are then consumed at a rate of 6 per pupil per turn. It happens automatically every turn, sort of like an upkeep cost. If you're out of rations, the pupils will eat any fruit that you may have, but they will not eat anything else. And if you run out of food altogether, then they starve, losing health until they die. The last resources are spices and potions. Spices are essentially turned into potions in a dispensary, and potions can be used to cure and heal pupils. So, with all of that hopefully understood, your general task is to fan out, gather as many resources as possible, all while you're making sure everyone's being fed and working efficiently so they rank up their disciplines. Once you hit your stockpile objectives, you can then just up and leave at any time, loading as many resources as you can onto your caravan and moving into the next halt. You could stick around if you wanted to load up even more, but the longer you wait in a given area, the more vagaries happen. Now, vagaries are like random events that occur, be it bad weather, a bad omen, some sort of dispute at camp, or something to that effect. You can typically see them about a turn before they're about to happen. I got a particularly bad one that I failed to notice right before it happened, where poisonous mosquitoes ravaged all the jungle tiles, causing all the pupils within them to get sick. This lowered their health over time and ultimately killed several of them. It was pretty rough. When I was running behind pretty badly, there were thunderstorms, lightning strikes, and wildfires damaging all the areas around me, making it an extremely hostile environment to be in. If you take damage, it carries over. You don't heal in between halts. You'll arrive at the next area battered and bruised and low on food if you don't plan accordingly and leave when you're at your best. So let's take a look at some of the more specifics when it comes to the depth of the game. The land you travel can at times be mystical and full of magic. There are sacred sites dotted around the halts that you can pray to in order to gain favors or offer sacrifices. There's also ancient remains with spirits inside that will either curse you or grant you benefits. Your pupils, specifically the herbalists that make the potions, they can specialize and turn into druids. Druids get in touch with their mystical roots and are able to uncover what lies beneath the ruins without awakening them, allowing you to avoid the bad omens or even change bad outcomes into good ones. The druid can also soothe mystical protective auras. Auras are like nature's way of protecting a certain area, a magical binding that prevents you from harvesting a certain type of resource. But a druid can speak with the aura source and soothe it, allowing you to harvest the resource temporarily or permanently if the druid has ranked up. This again feeds into that careful time management. You'll often just have a small window of opportunity for harvesting a resource because of an aura, so you'll need to get your pupils ready to run in and grab what they can before they're locked out. And finally, a druid can also predict major vagaries as soon as you arrive in a halt before they happen, giving you a lot of time to plan ahead. So that's some of the depth with character skill trees. That was just one discipline, but there's also a lot of depth when it comes to building. Every building has two different ways it can be constructed. You can either build it in place, static, leaving it behind when you leave the halt, or you can build a mobile version that's then packed up and added to the caravan when you leave. This second option is much more expensive to create, but it means that you can take the building with you. However, you do have to consider the space requirement. Your caravan has limited space. When ending a halt, there's a sort of inventory management minigame where you have limited space to take what you need with you, and buildings take up these really odd shapes to load onto your caravan. But again, if you have a skilled engineer, they can make the buildings more compact, so there is lots of options to fit your circumstance. There's also several smaller intricacies to learn about, such as building the same stuff adjacent to each other yields a bonus. Buildings can be upgraded to do different things. They have health and they need to be repaired after disasters like fires. Some buildings need to be built adjacent to your caravan, such as the pack animal appendices. These are essentially wild pack animals that you find in the halt. You need to tame them, bring them back to the caravan, and then construct an adjacent unique building with them. This can be a workshop to research technologies, a council to make what are sort of like laws, a camp to allow more pupils to work, and a market to exchange resources with other tribes at varying exchange rates. Now, speaking of other tribes, as the story goes, this great migration to the Eye takes place in cycles, and tribes from far and wide take part. Now every now and then you'll cross paths with them and you can hail them and do deals to gain new pupils to grow your own tribe. They are more mouths to feed though, so you need to be careful not to take on too many, especially given that the next areas on your journey might be quite hostile. If you're about to enter a canyon, there's going to be even less food in future, and if your economy has been based on what you've already been making, you might suffer. Unless, of course, you load up lots of food rations before you go. When taking on other pupils, you also have a sort of housing system. Now by default, the caravan houses 3 pupils, but you need to be able to build camps to create housing for others, and these need to be adjacent to your caravan as they consume a pack animal when built. So there's really only a few spaces to take more pupils on and have them do a job. If you don't have the space, but you take them on anyway, they can still explore the map and enter ruins, but they just can't work a resource unless you've got a particular skill or upgrade to allow it. Now one of the last things to mention is the knowledge points system. As you're leveling up your characters, you're also leveling up your tribe, and you can access your knowledge tree through your caravan in order to get permanent bonuses. Now sometimes you'll need this resource for other things such as laws and even to be able to leave the halt sometimes and progress further towards the eye. There is also a short campaign to get you introduced to the lore and teach you how to play the game, but primarily the sandbox is where you're going to be spending most of your time, as it is procedurally generated, making each playthrough different. And there's 4 different starting scenarios that you'll unlock each time you reach the eye, with one of them that gives you a different initial starting challenge. I personally found the game pretty challenging, but I got further with each attempt, which really felt like great progression, but it hurt all the more when I lost the character along the way and had a big setback. The game is of course permadeath, but rather uniquely, there are no enemies in the game. You're just battling the elements to survive. So that's it for my video. Let me know what you think of the game in the comments below. I said recently that I try to take sponsors for games I feel are of high quality and that my audience are likely to be interested in. So I was very happy to be able to cover this game, as I feel it just ticks those boxes and really deserves it. So remember to check the link in the description to find out more and to also help me out. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.